I'm Andrew Levine, and I'm about to present to you episode 2 of the Andrarchy Show. But before I did that, I wanted to share some of my thoughts on the format that the show is going to take and why I think it's a unique value proposition for its listeners. What I'm doing that's a little different is that the episodes are going to be on the short side, about 10 minutes. So, for example, Kurt and we talked probably for around 2-3 hours. And so what I'm going to do is break that up into 10-minute segments. While I was shooting, I was careful to try to organize our conversation into segments that could be fit into that time frame. And that accomplishes two things, which is that it allows me to edit it over time and release it over time. But that also addresses one of the main sticking points that I've always found with podcasts, which is that they are long and infrequent. So like Your Mom's House, one of my favorite comedy podcasts. But I have to wait 7 days for it to come out. And when it does come out, it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. Now, that's more comedy for me. So it's not like I'm complaining or anything, and obviously I can stop and come back to it later. But what I'm going to be doing is editing them over time, releasing them in standalone 10-minute segments, and so that way they're easier to digest by you, the audience members. You can consume them on your way to work, while you're working out. It's a lot easier to fit in 10 minutes here and there than an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then at the same time, it allows me to edit them over time instead of having to spend hours and hours and hours to get one episode ready. And then why would anybody listen to an hour and a half long episode by a guy they know nothing about? So I hope that will lead to a more pleasant experience for you guys, but of course the responsibility then falls on me to make sure that the episodes are interesting and compelling. And so with that, I present to you episode 2, which is the second part of my interview with Kurt Robinson, aka Churdsu, where we pick up our conversation regarding his experience of a psychotic break. I hope you enjoy. Previously on the Andrarchy Show.
So you're talking about my article about mental illness, or how to take advantage, or what to learn from a mental illness, or from an unusual state of mind, we could say. It's not an illness because it's not like there's a lesion, there's no abrasion, there's nothing physical that you can identify. They don't do that. They analyze it through behavior. So it's more of a behavioral issue than a physical issue. People said, well, we have this theory or this hypothesis, and it seems reasonable, and we expect the data to be filled in later. We'll color it in later, and they keep expecting that, but that's not necessarily what's happened. That's just what everyone's assuming. The fact is, like a lot of these things, people would describe as delusions, but some of the things that happened, I would say, were actually true. It's just that I got a little carried away, and started to think, well, if these things that I've been taught are firm and are laws and can't happen, are actually happening, then I have to assume that everything I know is wrong, which it sent me a little bit over the edge.
Did we cover the specific experience itself? Like, how long was this psychotic break? Is there a better term that you would use for it?
I don't know. Like we did
hallucinatory experience, spiritual experience.
Yeah, a spiritual awakening, I guess. But the problem is, I guess all of these terms have their own problems, because if I say it's psychotic, that implies it's purely negative and purely delusional. Whereas if I say it's a spiritual awakening, then that implies that it's pure and beautiful. Which these experiences, of course, they cause a lot of suffering, and that's part of it. So I don't know if there's any specific term that really encapsulates it. Maybe we could say something like a shamanistic awakening, something like that.
Okay, well, I think that brings up an interesting point, something I was wondering when I was thinking about this interview, which is there something that instigates an experience like this? Is this something that can happen to you randomly? Is this something you're afraid will happen in the future or at risk of suffering from in the future? Or is it a resolved issue?
Right. Yeah, great question. So the thing is, I don't entirely understand why this happened to me in the beginning. So I can't exactly answer why, if it might happen again. But the thing is, I do know how to deal with the consequences much better. So being more centered, knowing more about meditation and about logic that I mentioned in the article, that helps me know that just because I think something that I shouldn't accept that as truth, which is not, which is a lesson that I had to learn the hard way.
And that's a lesson that every person can learn from, which is fascinating, right? I mean, and maybe again, that's part of the reasoning for neurochemistry on such a spectrum, is because we feel like, oh, well, our perception of reality seems to be approximately true, so whatever I think is reality, whatever beliefs I have are probably true, when in reality, all of our beliefs are probably irrational. And so we should always be skeptical. Sorry to go off on that tangent.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, it's like Robert Anton Wilson said, I don't have any beliefs, but I do have quite a few suspicions, which I think is a healthy way to look at the world. You asked me about the causes, so I'd like to address that more thoroughly.
Please.
The cause of such an experience is this shamanistic or spiritual awakening. It's difficult to answer. I don't think I'll ever know entirely why such a thing happened. But we can look at a few different models and try to get an approximation. So, of course, if I go to the psychiatrist and ask him, well, okay, so you said I had a psychotic break, but why? And I guess they would give that answer about brain chemistry, or maybe they would more honestly say, I don't know. But I don't think we would get much inquiry there, because it doesn't seem to be that's a question that psychiatrists asks. It's more about what happens, like how do we treat it once it does happen, rather than why it happens in the first place. So that maybe they should be asking that. Another thing, another model that I thought was a little more helpful is if you look at it from a kind of yogic perspective. So I say that, okay, so for some reason I started having all this extra energy, and I started to dance, and I started to have increased empathy, and my drawing ability increased, and these other things that happened, which in the end were positive, and my thinking changed, especially this one. My thinking changed from more linear to being more conceptual, thinking in concepts rather than in a straight line. So rather than thinking purely in forms of logic, or like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, I can look at something and get the whole idea of it. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. I think that's how I tend to think, by the way. I think that's naturally how it's very I'm very good with abstract concepts. I've always just been naturally, like I was talking about this the other day, like organic chemistry is always viewed as one of the hardest subjects in universities, and that was one of the few subjects that really came naturally to me. And it was because I was really able to just imagine the interactions of the particles as if they were like sentient beings. And I was trying to tutor people. I was tutoring in it because I did well in it. And I was trying to explain to them, like this particle likes this type of particle because it's big, or or because it's attracted to these properties in the other ones. And I was the worst tutor ever because I didn't realize that's not how people think. But please go on.
That's cool. Yeah, well, that's, of course, in science and in computer programming, people generally think in more linear fashions, and so there can be that kind of clash. But that's interesting that it would give you an advantage in that area. This explanation that I had was that spontaneously my kundalini, and was one of the most powerful energies in the body or in the soul from this yoga perspective. It lies at the base of the spine, and when it combines with the energy at the top of your head, the crown chakra, and I might be getting this wrong because I haven't read about this for many years, but this is the basic story. So these two energies combine, and it's kind of like this nuclear reaction. It creates this huge amount of energy in the body, and releases these abilities. But again, this explanation only gets me to a certain point, because I have to say, well, hang on, why did I have this spontaneous thing within me? It's not like I mean, I might have been doing a little bit of meditation, but if you want to release the kundalini, it's supposed to take years and years of discipline to do it. So that explanation still only gets me to a certain point.
Sorry, before you go on, I just want to make a point, because for anybody who might be watching this, I just want to make the point that, I mean, I'm a very skeptical, scientific, objective, evidence-based person, but to kind of reinterpret or reframe what you just said, what I would say is that much of our body is still very much a mystery to ourselves. And so these words that you're using, while they might not be scientific, they're just words that people throughout time have developed to attempt to describe the mysterious events that we find going on through our body. And like, so for example, somebody watching might be like, whoa, why aren't you calling them out on these bullshit energies? And there's a fairness to that, but my response would be that, well, what other words do we have to describe these events? What we had were imbalances, mental illness, many concepts which are just falling apart at the seams now. All of right? All the people on the cutting edge of these sciences are going, yeah, we thought we had a framework, but it doesn't really work. We thought we had pills that cured people, and mysteriously they've been doing worse and worse against placebos over time. I don't even know how you do that, but like when you go and look at drugs that used to be staples, like Prozac, I'm pretty sure that Prozac now is having a lot of trouble beating placebos. And Prozac was seen as the first line of defense against, I think, multiple mental illnesses, and now we're seeing that it's not beating sugar pills, which means it doesn't do anything except give you horrible side effects, which isn't something people really seem comfortable admitting yet, even though it's science. That's science.
Yeah. I mean, it says so on the pack. I mean, you buy these things and it says possible side effects, suicidality, suicidal ideation, and that sort of thing. That's scary.
Especially when it doesn't do anything. And now people might be saying, hey, that's really a dangerous thing to say, and obviously I'm not a medical professional. But I'm just restating what it means to not be able to beat a placebo. If you cannot beat a placebo, you are by definition not doing anything, because placebos...
you're actually doing harm.
Yeah, placebos by definition don't do anything.
Yeah, except give our bodies an excuse to try to heal, something like that.
From that framework, all a psychoactive drug that does not beat placebos does is give you negative side effects, or not. But most of them generally do give you some negative side effect.
On that point, if we wanted to take something like this Kundalini Kundalini awakening and jam it into a psychiatric model, we'd talk about something like, I'm trying to remember the term, but it's something like adrenal overdrive, or it's like where your adrenal gland just goes crazy for a few months and then it burns out, and has a problem generating adrenaline after that, for a while.